Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began on February 24, 2022, the world has witnessed one of the most devastating conflicts since World War II. But beyond the heartbreaking loss of life and shattered cities, there's another story: the staggering economic cost. How much has this war drained from nations like Russia, Ukraine, the United States, NATO, and European countries? Where is this money coming from, and where is it going? Who profits, and at what cost? Is this war worth it for Vladimir Putin, and what role does the US play? Today, we'll unravel these questions, diving into the numbers, the strategies, and the human toll of a conflict that's reshaping global economies and geopolitics. The cost of the Ukraine war is astronomical, with estimates varying due to opaque reporting and differing definitions of cost. Let's start with Russia. According to a US Department of Defense estimate from February 2024, Russia has spent up to $211 billion on military operations, equipping troops, and maintaining its war machine. This includes $40 billion in direct military costs as of September 2022, with projections of $132 billion through 2024. Russia's defense budget has surged to 6.7% of its GDP, over $145 billion in 2024 alone, outpacing all European countries combined. Add to this $1.3 trillion in lost economic growth through 2026 and $10 billion in canceled arms sales, and the economic toll is crippling. Ukraine, fighting for its survival, has spent far more than its economy can bear. Direct war costs exceed twice Ukraine's GDP, with domestic spending and external aid combined. The Kiel Institute estimates that between January 2022 and December 2024, Ukraine received $119.7 billion in aid from the US and $138.7 billion from Europe, including military, financial, and humanitarian support. The EU alone provided 11.1 billion euros in arms via the Ukraine Assistance Fund. The United States has been a cornerstone of Western support, contributing $119.7 billion by December 2024, according to the Kiel Institute. This includes $69.2 billion in direct military aid since 2014, with funds for weapons, training, and intelligence. However, President Trump's claims of $300 billion are exaggerated. European countries and NATO allies have stepped up significantly. Europe as a whole spent $138.7 billion by 2024, with Germany and the UK among the largest donors. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte noted that in 2024, allies provided over 50 billion euros, with 60% from Europe and Canada. Poland, bordering Ukraine, spends 4% of its GDP on defense, buying heavily from the US and South Korea. China's role is less direct but critical. NATO's Jens Stoltenberg has accused China of supplying microelectronics and dual-use technologies to Russia, enabling missile production. While exact figures are unclear, China's economic support helps Russia evade sanctions, indirectly fueling the war. The bulk of spending goes to military operations. For Russia, a third of its defense budget covers weapons production, repairs, and purchases. $6.5 million per caliber missile, $3,000 per artillery shell. Russia also buys ammunition from North Korea and drones from Iran, straining its budget further. Ukraine's funds support salaries, ammunition, and advanced systems like US-provided Javelin missiles and HIMARS. Western aid to Ukraine includes direct military support, tanks, F-16s, air defenses, and indirect aid like satellite intelligence and logistics. Humanitarian aid helps refugees, while financial aid stabilizes Ukraine's economy. For example, the US's $33 billion package in 2022 included $20 billion for Ukraine's armed forces. How is this funded? Russia relies heavily on oil and gas revenues, expected to account for 5% of GDP in 2025. High oil prices, $70 per barrel, are critical, but sanctions limit access to Western markets. Ukraine depends on foreign aid, with EU loans on generous terms, some repaid via frozen Russian assets. The US funds its aid through congressional budgets, though delays in 2024 stalled $60 billion in support. Europe's contributions come from national budgets and EU mechanisms like the Ukraine Assistance Fund. War is tragic, but for weapon companies, it's profitable. The US defense industry, including Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing, has seen a surge in orders for Javelins, HIMARS, and Patriot systems. Aid to Ukraine has revitalized production lines, addressing bottlenecks that could aid future conflicts, like a potential Taiwan scenario. Europe's defense sector, though slower to scale, benefits too. Poland's $16.9 billion deal with South Korean firms for howitzers and tanks is a prime example. Stockholm International Peace Research Institute notes global military spending hit $2.4 trillion in 2023, a 35-year high, partly driven by Ukraine. Companies profit through government contracts, with the US alone spending $916 billion on defense in 2023. While exact profit margins are hard to pin down, the war has undeniably boosted the military-industrial complex. The war's destruction is staggering. Ukraine's infrastructure, homes, schools, hospitals, has been devastated. Estimates suggest rebuilding could cost over $500 billion. Russia's attacks on civilian targets, like power grids, add to this toll. Financial capital destruction in Russia reached $322 billion in 2022 alone, with markets still volatile. Human costs are worse. Over 700,000 Russian casualties and 350,000 total lives lost, including civilians, paint a grim picture. Ukraine faces millions of refugees, straining Europe's resources. If Russia wins, NATO's Mark Rutte warns of trillions in future costs to contain a resurgent Moscow. Russia plans to increase defense spending by 14% in 2025, prioritizing a wartime economy. Ukraine seeks sustained Western aid, but US support is uncertain under Trump, who pushes Europe to lead. NATO aims to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP, up from 2%, to deter Russia. Europe struggles to boost arms production, with depleted stockpiles a concern. Is the war worth it for Putin? His obsession with Ukraine, outlined in his 2021 essay, sees it as existential. Victory could embolden him toward Poland or the Baltics, but at a cost: 315,000 troops killed or wounded, economic isolation, and reliance on China. Many argue Putin's gamble is unsustainable long-term. The US role is pivotal. Supporting Ukraine weakens Russia without US boots on the ground, costing just 1.5% of its federal budget. It strengthens NATO and deters China, but Trump's push for a ceasefire and resource demands, like $500 billion in Ukrainian minerals, complicates the picture. The Ukraine war's cost, hundreds of billions spent, trillions in potential future losses, and countless lives destroyed, reveals a world at a crossroads. Russia's aggression, Ukraine's resilience, and the West's response have reshaped global priorities. Weapon companies profit, but the human and economic toll overshadows gains. For Putin, the war is a high-stakes gamble with diminishing returns. For the US and its allies, it's a test of resolve and burden sharing. As we move forward, the question isn't just about money, it's about what kind of world we want. Will nations unite to rebuild Ukraine and deter aggression, or will division let authoritarian ambitions grow? The answers lie in the choices made today. Thank you for joining me in this exploration. Let's keep asking the hard questions, because understanding the cost of war is the first step to building peace.